Great. Okay. So hello, thank you for coming. And thank you for people on Zoom as well. Just want to give you a little bit of background as to why I'm kind of doing this. So I'm in my come in. I'm in my fourth year of undergrad, and in fourth year we have to do something called a creative project, which is basically just do a project. And for me, over the past, particularly over the past 4 years in conservatoire, I've found there isn't much support for people with dyslexia, and there isn't much awareness and understanding of how it actually affects education and performance. So that's kind of the whole reason why I've decided to do this, because I'm dyslexic myself. So, a bit about me, if I can find my cursor. So I had like a normal education. So I went to state schools, like primary, high school. I went to the high school sixth form, and then I found myself here at RNCM. I would say probably like my educational story is probably very typical. I struggled a bit in primary school, had extra maths and English lessons. And then when I got to high school, struggled a little bit, but then found my way with it. And then I really kind of peaked when I got to like year 9, which is about 14. And then when I was 16, I was having private violin lessons. I'm a violinist. And I was doing music theory, and I I spelt rhythm wrongly in 5 different ways. And my teacher was like, I think you might be dyslexic. My son's dyslexic. So then we spoke to my mum and dad, and then mum and dad pushed me to get tested. And then school was very much kind of pushing back, because like she's fine, she's functioning, she's in high sets, nothing wrong with her. And then it wasn't until I then got tested. They didn't think I actually had dyslexia. We found something that I had, something called Ehrlich syndrome, which is very similar, which is it holds all the same characteristics as dyslexia, but it also just adds depth of session issues, and like I get a lot more distortions on the page. And then, but that was all before, like, just before my GCSEs. So it was, I think it was like 6 weeks, and then we had a massive rush of trying to figure out what I needed, and then I found out that I had like 25% slow process as well. And then it wasn't until I actually got to RNCM, and basically I was looking for apply for disabled students allowance, and they didn't recognise Ehrlich as a condition. So then they were like, let's get you tested and see if there's anything else. And then they basically said, I do have dyslexia. So I've only really known about dyslexia for 4 years, and it's been a bit of an interesting thing for me, because I didn't know that it actually affected music. I just thought it was the education, and then that was it. So it's been really eye-opening for me to do this, because I am classic dyslexic, which is quite funny. So that's just a little bit about me. I just thought, let's just go with something, start off with a bit of interactive. So there's different things. And I just want you to put thumbs up or thumbs down when I read them, which ones you think is a myth and which ones you don't. So the first one, dyslexia only happens in the English language. Is that a myth?
Is that a myth? It is a myth, right?
Yeah, so if it's a myth, put your thumbs up, sorry, if it's a, sorry. Great, yeah, great, it is a myth. Next one, dyslexia is usually found in more creative fields. It is a difficult one. So dyslexics are usually found in creative fields, more typically. If you're dyslexic, you're dumb. So if it's a myth, thumb up. If it's not a myth, thumb down. It's hard. Yeah, so it's a myth. We're not dumb. Dyslexia affects your coordination.
So that's a myth.
So if it's a myth, thumbs up. it does affect your coordination. Dyslexics have their own type of thought process. They actually do. So these are all things that I will be covering. Dyslexia is caused by not enough reading. So it's a myth, thumbs up, if not a thumbs down. Yeah, it's not caused by enough reading. Last two, dyslexia is a vision issue. It's not a vision issue. Great. And then dyslexia can be hereditary. It can be hereditary. So yeah, that's just a bit of a different thing. Thank you for for doing that. So I just thought what I actually will say is there's going to be a lot of information on this. I've tried to make sure that it's not information overload, but there's so many things I would like to get across. So don't worry about getting it all or writing it all down. I will be sending stuff out if you'd like. So just don't worry about it. So I thought, why not start with the definition? So I will be referencing this British Dyslexia Association. So they have their great foundation, and they have everything's, the information is really factual and it's very well backed up. So I just took their definition. So dyslexia is a learning difficulty that primarily affects the skills involved in accurate and fluent word reading and spelling. Characteristic features of dyslexia are difficulties in the phonological awareness, the verbal memory, and the processing speeds. Dyslexia occurs across the range of intellectual abilities. It is best thought of a continuum, not a distinct category, and there are no clear cut-off points. And then just as a little fun fact at the bottom, that dyslexia is thought to occur up to 10% of the population, which for me is actually quite shocking, because that's quite a lot of the population, but I'm sure that number will be bigger. There's just that not many people are diagnosed from later on. So for me, kind of this is like a science behind it. So I kind of need to know the reasons why for things. So in case anyone else is like that, don't worry if this is too much. But I love science, so this is a great amount for me. So something that I actually didn't know until I started this research was, let me just add these in. Something that I actually didn't know until I started this research, that it actually, it's actually a trait of your brain. Dyslexia is a trait of your brain. It's like no coping skill, no like amazing tool will actually fix it. So I've spent quite a lot of my years thinking, right, I can fix it, that I can get around it, and so many different, and it's actually you can't. And the way I kind of think about it is, I've been reading a book lately on called the way people think, and they describe like psychopaths, for example. You know, you hear a lot of really negative stuff about them in like in the news and things, but if you actually look back at evolution, the reason why we actually have psychopathic brains is because they needed somebody to go out and hunt and have no emotion and have no empathy and just go get the food and come back. Same with like the helpers, they always need someone to go rescue someone in case someone was in hair or was stuck or something. So there's a reason for every single brain type, and I'll go on to the reason why dyslexics are needed later on, but I just thought that was such kind of really interesting fact. So before the 1980s, a lot of researchers basically focused their research on the cerebellum at the bottom, which is the bottom bit on the top of your spine, and that is the thing that just reacts. That's your fight or flight, has no reason, has no logic. But after the 1980s, the researchers focused on the planum temporal, which is, if you think about where your temporal lobes are, you just kind of go diagonal and up a bit. That is where it is. And basically that is associated with auditory and language related processes. So that's like phonical decoding, assigning sounds to shapes and symbols, and just basically understanding sounds, particularly in language. And what was really interesting, so when they did the autopsies of these brains in this research, 65 to 75% of the selected brains, the two planners were asymmetrical, usually with the left side being bigger. When they looked at the eight brains that were diagnosed dyslexics for a very long time, they noticed that they were actually symmetrical. So there was no left side bigger with the dyslexic brains. And they believe that basically, and then they found a lot of abnormalities as well, with cells basically being in the wrong place, and they figured out that that was all there since before birth. So then what they also found where the abnormalities were, so we have two pathways, like cell pathways. So we have the magnocellular pathway, which is like really bit like big cells that move really quickly but contain not much information. So that's the magnocellular pathway. Then we've got the parvocellular pathway, which is really small cells that move quite slow but carry a lot of information. And with the dyslexics, they found that the magnocellular, which is the large, that moves fast but contains low amount of information, they actually varied in different sizes. So if you think about, you know, those cells are, and I'll come to it later on, are involved in timing and transferring information from one neuron to the other. If all those cells are different shapes, things are going to get missed in the signal. So I just thought that was really interesting. And then, breath. Just kind of a bit of a summary. So I think it's really important to realise that the symptoms experienced from dyslexic actually do have a biological basis, and no parent or person who has dyslexia should, you know, be upset by that, because they can't prevent it, they can't change it, it's how they are actually made. So that's a bit around the sciencey bit. Okay, what does it look like in education? So I feel in education it is it's very well known. As soon as, like, for me, as soon as I thought dyslexia, but even before I was diagnosed, I always thought, okay, reading, writing, spelling. That was the three main things that everyone knows. But there's actually a lot of other things that people don't realise. So short-term memory, so how your brain takes on new information. Visual motor coordination, so whether that's so that's like copying off a board, writing things down, kind of general coordination issues. Working memory, so how your brain processes old and new information together. Visual processing, the ability to interpret and give meaning to what it sees. And then rapid naming and phonological awareness. The way I always kind of think about short-term memory is, if I said yellow banana, you're just thinking about yellow banana. But if I say yellow banana and say now they go on trees, you're holding the yellow banana and now you're thinking about the trees, and that's your working memory. That's the kind of the way I distinguish them. It took me a very long time to understand the difference. So I'm just going to go on to a few like symptoms of different age categories. And this will seem like a lot of information on the page, so don't worry about taking it all in. This is just so you've got some awareness. Oh, it's thinking about it. Oh, no. Okay. So early years. So I'll just give you a second just to read through them. So what's really interesting when I've been looking through these myself is I have a history of slow speech and development. So I think I was quite late, wasn't I? Yeah, I was quite late with speech. I still have difficult keeping time. I don't think that's ever going to change. Keeping time, keeping rhythm. Sequencing was something, and obvious good and bad days. And I do muddle words continuously. So yeah. Primary school age. So I've tried breaking these down into sections that you can kind of understand a little bit better, and just so it's a lot easier to read. And I think what's actually really important to recognise as well, when you go through when the people or dyslexics go through different ages, they will basically still have similar issues. They will either just be a little bit adapted because they've got better coping strategies, or they'll just stay the same. Just things just get harder, and they'll get stuck on places that aren't developed. So for me, my organisation, for example, was horrific, and I'm sure my parents can agree. But that's something with my coping skills that I've got a lot better with. And same with kind of my reading. My reading is a lot better. I would not be doing this if I was like 7 years back. So it is things you can get better with it, but then some things you've got to work with as well. And then secondary. And then what I've done, I've just kind of put them all together and done a bit of a general signs to kind of look for. So if anyone is teaching and working with adults or children, or you're finding yourselves that you're thinking that you struggle with it, these are the general things I would suggest to kind of look for. So processing speeds, concentration, difficulty following instructions, forgetting or muddling words and letters, coordination issues and memory issues. But obviously a lot of these things can be other different things as well. So the way I kind of always thought about it is, it's kind of how do you distinguish it's dyslexia or not? And it's the severity of behaviour plus the length of time it continues. Then if you feel like those two are quite equal, or one's more or less, then that might point towards dyslexia, but it could also mean something else. So I would just always recommend just go. It depends, like if you're working with children in schools and education, they're in a really lucky place if they can go and get assessed and stuff. If you're an adult, then you can go through the foundations, you can go through your GP. There's loads of different ways you can go through to find answers. So how does this affect in music performance? So basically the research is basically debating that it's just a phonological processing issue. So it's basically the ability to see symbols and relate it to speech and sounds. But my question isn't seeing a symbol and relating sounds to it, isn't that just music? You're seeing a symbol and you're assigning that sound to that thing to create another thing. So it's like, so actually how can we be musicians? And what was really interesting, when I got diagnosed with Erlen, they were like, oh, what does she do? And I was like, I'm a musician. She's like, oh, you're one of these ones who are, you're not meant to be able to do music. You're one of these like extra ones. And I was like, great. Whatever that's meant to mean, I'll take it. And it's just thought there is an idea. So in 2000, this retired pediatric neurologist, Neil Gordon, proposed the idea of basically a music dyslexia, because he believed that the areas of the brain that involve reading music and text differed. There is some other research-based stuff about that, so if you're interested in it, I'd recommend having a look. But I just wanted to throw that in there. So the 5 main ways it affects music are these. So we've got short-term memory, coordination, organisation, concentration, and information processing. So I'll be diving into these a little bit more individually. Right, so short-term memory. So what is it? So it's the capacity to keep a small amount of information in the mind active and ready in a ready, available state for a short period of time. So this is something that someone said to me once, and I thought it actually blew my mind. So unless you're given something completely unseen and you're asking someone to apply what they know, then you're always measuring their memory. So just take a moment to figure that out. So I just think that's really interesting. So giving someone something that they've never seen before and asking them, and you're not asking them to apply what they know. If you are doing that, then it is basically a memory thing, which I think is really interesting, because a lot of what you do in education is memory. But if someone who has short-term memory issues, then they're really going to struggle in that system. So I think that is really interesting. Right, you've had enough of me talking for a bit. Let's do a bit of an activity. So if you've got anything to write it down. Just thought this might be quite fun. Stop. Stop. Okay. Doing that thing what my lectures do in panic. There. Got it. Oh. Do you mean? Help. Sorry, guys.
So I'm gonna drag this in. What is that?
Huh? Yay! Thank you. So basically, the start of this is you're not allowed to write it down until it's. So you're going to see a sequence of letters, and then you just got to look at it, remember it, and then once it's gone, then you write it down. I tried this and I cheated, so I was like, oh, I'm just going to write it down as a scene. I was like, no, it's a memory test. So you'll see a sequence of letters and just remember it. Okay. Right. Number 2. Okay. 3. 4. Okay. One more. Cool. So then, so they're the answers. So I'm not going to ask anyone to tell me the answers, but what so there's 2 letters in the first one, so if you only got one, then it'd be 50%. So see if you can calculate your percentages, or you can do it later on, whatever you prefer. But it's just a bit of an idea, because everybody in this room will have different short-term memory spans. Just a bit of an interesting thing. So when I did this, I got, I think, 80%, which I've got a really good short-term memory. But you can imagine if you didn't have a very good short-term memory, this is what it is like in education. Someone will tell you something and you've got to remember it. But then if you struggled, then you can kind of imagine how that would be. And I'm sure if you do have a short-term memory, problems with short-term memory, then you could probably already sympathise. But it's just a bit of a way to, if any of you do have really good short-term memories, for me, I was like, wow, okay, well, I can imagine that if that was in education and it was every single day, I'd come home thinking, I don't know, I haven't learned anything, don't know what I'm doing, lost the plot. Like, so it's just a bit of a fun thing to do. Right, now I'm going to go back. I've got this. Don't know I've got this. Oh, yes, got it. Great.
Another one.
Well, I'll try. I'll sure try. Okay, so how does this affect music education and performance? So these are some of the things that I've come up with. So kind of unable to recognise melodies, and because you're unable to retain pitches or rhythms. Taking notes in lectures, I really struggle with this, and I have okay short-term memory, so I can imagine someone who doesn't. Missing vital pieces of information to understand the topic. If you have short-term memory issues that I didn't know this, you have a decreased ability in analytical skills. So part of some of the classes we do at RNCM is musicianship and theory, and in theory you have to analyse a score. So if you have short-term memory issues, you will struggle with that part of the course, which I think is really interesting. Poor attention to detail, difficulty staying on track, lose track of belongings, and we all know a student that has the ability to lose everything that they have, and yeah, unable to remember the task of the day. And I just thought this was interesting. I found this in researching this thing at the bottom. So in music, memorising a simple melody, what it involves is taking a mental screenshot of it, which is in that screenshot, all you're doing is taking the idea of the structure and some of the details on top. If you have short-term memory issues, you will probably just about get the structure. You probably won't get the detail, which I think is really interesting. And there's for the reference there, so if you want to look into that research a little bit more, you can. But I just thought that was super interesting. Right, ways to help. These are the different ways. So reducing the memory load. So give the person less stuff, less information, so they don't have to memorise as much in such a short term. Repeat and review. Teach step by step. I think this is really important. So if you've got, I teach and I've got a child who gets really overwhelmed really quickly, and I literally just have to sometimes take a step by step, and then even that's too much, and we just take a break and we stop, and then we go again, and then but just not moving off that step until they 100% get it. Making links and keywords. So what I mean by that is for example, if I was teaching, so in my last lesson we were doing bow hold, and I was like, oh, she was telling me about a story about a spider, and I was like, oh, great, we use our fingers like spiders, and we can go up the bow and we can use our fingertips. So it's like making those links, so it's already using information that they know that they can just transfer rather than having to attain new information. Memory aids, I'm all for memory aids. If anybody ever went into my room, it's full of posters, visual stuff. I create a lot of visual stuff for myself. Pause, paraphrase, summarize, and allow time. So that constant repetition, but also the summary as well, I think is really great, and that time. Get physical, so don't just talk at them like I'm doing with you guys. Get them to move about, get it in the body in a different way. That will take the pressure off the memory. And colour codes. See what colours work best for the kids or adults or anybody, and use it. And then this is just a summary of a summary. These are just kind of my ideas. And I'll always keep coming back to no information overload and multi-sensory approach. Those two things as a thing that works a lot, for a lot of the things that will come up. Right, concentration. So I didn't actually know this. So many dyslexics struggle to maintain concentration for a period of time, or find it really difficult to process different stimuli at the same time. So this is me to a T. And the only way I found this out was when I got noise cancelling headphones for the first time, and then put them on, and I was like, oh my goodness, I can concentrate longer than 10 minutes, particularly in studying. It was an absolute game changer for me, and I really struggle, particularly if there's stuff going around in the background. Actually concentrating on what someone's saying to me is really difficult. And I just thought, so these are the symptoms that it can come across as many others, but I thought these are probably one of the most important ones and typical. So I'm very much a daydreamer, struggle to stay on task, I struggle to write for long periods of time, and I become very, very tired and fatigued quite frequently. So they're just some of the ways. And I just thought as well, we're talking about dyslexia and it's one type of brain, but actually the human brain as a general can only concentrate for 20 minutes before concentration decays. So I just thought that was quite interesting to kind of put into perspective as well. Like, this isn't just a dyslexic thing, this is a brain thing. And then I just wanted to make a bit of a note on multitasking, because if you're dealing with somebody that has lower levels of concentration attainment, then if you're going to give them more task at once, it's going to take up more space, more brain space, more energy and more concentration energy. So what I'd say is, which is basically an instrument, I was playing the other day and I was thinking, actually, how many movements am I doing at one thing? And just to go from the heel of the bow to the tip, it actually took 7 movements. And that's just my right hand, never mind my left, and then the extra information from sound feedback, from musical notation, from all of that. There's a lot that we do as instrumentalists that is a multitasking thing. So if someone's really struggling, I just break it down. I'm not going to watch that because we do not have time, but it's a good video, I recommend. And then again, these are just some of the things. Something that's really helped me, and that my teachers really helped me with, is finding my concentration sweet spot. So I found that I can concentrate for 45 minutes before I start to get really tired. And then I'm able to push it like a little bit each time. But I used to only really concentrate for probably about 15 minutes properly. But I've managed with just pushing it every so often. I do 15 minutes and do that 3 times, and then I felt, okay, that feels comfortable, then push it 2 minutes extra, and just did it like that and worked up my concentration levels. It takes a lot and it takes a lot of energy, but it is something that you can push. And I think if you're teaching, particularly in a big class, in a whole group class, this is something I really struggle with. Like, how do you get 30 kids' attention at once, particularly if they've all got different levels of concentration spans. And I found the ones that I really struggled to engage was I literally would just say, like, Bob, I'm going to be asking you a question after this exercise. This is your time to answer after this. So then they're ready. Okay, I need to stay like concentrating because I need to answer this question. So, and using their name in particular as well, kind of re-engage them. Breaks, and just try and get rid of as much stimuli as possible. Distracting stimuli. Yeah. Coordination. So coordination, again, I only figured out for me probably about 3 months ago that coordination was an issue, which is a bit late for me because I've just gone through 4 years of a conservatoire course, but can definitely work on it. So dyslexics often have poor coordination, motor control and hand-eye coordination, and this is commonly shown through untidy handwriting, being clumsy, which was me, struggling to tie shoelaces, which was me, and it's really interesting is actually a lot of people, once I've spoke to them, a lot of other dyslexic musicians actually do struggle with this, and this is probably one of the common symptoms that not many people know about. I won't go into these, but these are for any extra, if anyone wants to do any extra research, these are the 3 research and things that I found really interesting. And this one explains what I said before about the magnocelia and things being mistimed because the cells are different shapes and sizes. This one, which for me was life-changing, because this is what I struggle with to a T, which is in this research and experiment, they found that dyslexic musicians struggle to control struggle to coordinate 2 limbs going at the same time, but they also find that the left hand, when the left hand has to move quick, basically left hand struggles to move quicker than the right, which for me is, I play violin, and that is one of the biggest struggles that I'm struggling with at the moment, is my left hand doesn't want to move, but my right does. So I think it's really interesting. And then the third one is basically just about automation, which dyslexics really struggle with, because so to get automation, you have your short-term memory, your working memory, long-term, and then once all the information passes through that's when it becomes automised. If dyslexics struggle with short-term and working memory, you've got 2 massive barricades there. There's not much information going for automation, which is just something to be aware of. It can be worked on and can be helped, but just something to be aware of. And again, coordination, so it's a bit of a tricky one. My thing is go and find out what it actually is first, because it could be dyspraxia, could be dyslexia, could be a motor condition, MS, could be anything. So I would definitely go to one of those sources, the health bodies, to help get an idea of what it is, and then they will give you kind of personalised stuff to help with that. Organisation. This is something I've got a lot better at. Still, I used to be really bad at this, and yeah, organisation affects all areas of your life, I'm sure you know. But what I thought was really interesting was within research, it actually boils down to kind of 3 points. So organisation with dyslexics, they're unable to organise their belongings, prioritise their actions, and allot their time efficiently and meet deadlines. So it's a kind of the prioritising of things as well, which I thought was interesting. So these are just some of the things that it can struggle with in terms of education and music. So like education, like writing essays, grades not reflecting their skill or potential. That was me for quite a lot. I was always not really at the beginning. Everyone always set me like really low target grades because they didn't think I could reach them, and then I eventually had smashed them. But yeah, it's quite a difficult thing to be in. Music, I think it's actually, you struggle a lot more with organisation in music in terms as with you know, it's a lot more visible. Like if you turn up to a rehearsal, if you turn up and prepared, it's a lot more for everybody to see and a lot more to make judgments. With education, you can just get away with, oh, it's just unorganised, like they'll grow out of it. It's a little bit more difficult to get away with in music. And then these are just some of the things to help. And I think particularly if you're teaching, what all people, kids or people struggle with in organisation is structure. They need structure. That is the key thing. So they need to know what is coming. So whether that's writing out the lesson plan and the lesson structure before you even begin, let them know what materials that they need, and they need consistency in that. And that's something as teachers, if any of you are teachers, that's what you can, it's the best thing you can do for them. Give them structure, make them aware of what they need, what's going to happen in the duration of the day. And then second is identify the person's preferred learning style. This is a thing that has changed a lot of stuff for me and in my teaching, because I'm a very visual and kinesthetic person, as you can probably tell visually from the PowerPoints. I am attracted to visual stuff. I don't do well with people just talking at me for hours. And I've finally got a really good teacher who's very aware of that, and she's like, right, okay, I can see you switching off. Let's move, let's do something, like let's stomp around the room, or so that is the best thing you can do, I think, for students. Grab and go folders is something that I did with one of my students who was just, he couldn't, like, he'd give him it and it gone within seconds and no one knew where it went. So I always either had a grab and go folder where he didn't touch it, he just took the folder and took it with him to lessons, or I gave him 2 books of everything, so one stayed at home, one stayed with me, and that worked out really well. Yeah, and you can always, you know, help your students set reminders, and erasable stationery, highlighters, pens, brilliant. I really recommend them. Information processing. So dyslexics can have basically slow processing speed. So I have 25% slow processing. Most people can manage between 5 to 7 elements of information at once. Dyslexics manage 3 to 4. Yeah, with the visual processing, it's basically just a person's ability to understand and process written information and break spoken language down into parts affecting the reading and spelling. And then on the outside of the eye, if you couldn't tell it was an eye, I've had some interesting drawings when I've been trying to do this, is the visual disturbances that dyslexic can have. So discomfort, text shimmering, flickering, losing track, texting out of focus, blurring text, headaches. So that's just some of the things to be aware of. And what I thought was actually, which I didn't know this about dyslexia, was auditory processing. So this is something I really struggle with. So it's those things come out the ear, the things that you can struggle with. But it's really interesting because when I read about this, I was like, oh, all my negative experience makes sense. So in grades, I failed every single oral part. I always got like 8 or under. I think passes 12. Could not do it. And even when scales, so when the examiner would say to me, play G minor melodic in this layer pattern with these many octaves, I'd be like, G what? And I just could not hold that information. And that is why, auditory processing. But imagine that in music college or music life. You know, I do a lot of stuff with original artists and bands, and it instills the fear in me. So, oh, just play this, and I'm like, oh, I don't know, I can't get it. So it does affect people in different ways. But that's just something to be aware of. And if you know you lack in it, that creates a lot of anxiety. So I think it's just something to be aware of. Right, I've got one more like little activity a part of this section. So I'm gonna, hopefully this works, I'm gonna put something up really quickly on the screen, and you just want you to read it, okay? Oh, that was a little bit slow. Does anybody know what it said? Paris in the spring. So if I take it back, do you notice anything different? Paris in the spring. So I stole this from someone I used to do work at Ox with. He used to use this as an exercise to teach kids to look at the music. But I thought this was great for processing because he did this in the class, can't tell you how many times, and I did not get it. Every single time was a Paris in the spring. Did not see the second there. So this is just something that that is information processing. You're reading it and you're processing it. But if you've got slower speeds, you won't catch it all. But that was a bit mean. That was quite quick. But yeah, positives. So basically things you can do to help. So the most important thing is break down the information, put it all into small chunks, and then kind of remember, as soon as you put pressure on, it is really hard to produce the information. Just caught my dad smiling, and the reason why he's smiling is because my dad's got a phrase saying, how do you eat elephants, and you eat it in small chunks. So that was a constant memory I got when I was younger. And something that I found is actually really good, and I've personally experienced this as well. So if I've been like really struggling to process and kind of get some words out, what one of my teachers was amazing at, she just walked away. She's like, let me think, and just went and organised a case. Or so she wasn't just standing there looking at me waiting for an answer. And for me, that took the pressure off, because then I could actually think, and then I do it with my students now, and you can still watch the body language and you can tell when they're ready, but just walk away, let them think. This is just something. So dyslexic are really good thinkers. You just got to give us time. And this is what I was talking about before, where there is an actual thought process called dyslexic thinking. And I don't think we've got time for the video now. But I would definitely recommend just having a Google of it, and it is great. It is something that has now been recognised, and you can actually put it down as a skill on LinkedIn, and it's recognised by a lot of employers, because it's very like lateral, very problem solving, and very good reason, very good empathy and emotional skills. Other conditions. So just wanted to mention some of these. With having a neurodivergence, you most likely will have others. And these are some of the things that you can have. For me, I've always struggled with confidence and self-esteem, always. Performance anxiety was a big one for me, but that was linked to my confidence. Tiredness all the time. Keeping time, still all the time, unfortunately. Sense direction got better, and social situations are not too bad. But just to be aware that some of these things that it can have an effect. Okay, this is just one thing I wanted to kind of get in there. So, as great as it is of having a dyslexic brain, not everybody's aware of it. And I just wanted to share some of the things that I've had told to me the past 4 years. And this isn't blaming anybody, but I just want to kind of put it out there that words can be really damaging, and particularly from teachers. And if you're somebody that already feels like an outcast anyway, and then you have these words on top of it, it only impacts it further. And I feel, and I get it. I understand sometimes you're just too tired, and you want to have an easy day, and you don't want to be thinking creatively. But if you're a teacher, you pick that job, you know what I mean? And at the end of the day, like, you're not there to be damaged, and people are there to inspire them. And for me, a lot of this stuff was really damaging, and now I'm separated from it. But I just kind of wanted to put it in there that, all of this was to do with my neurodivergence, which is quite sad, really. And these are only a few, but I just kind of wanted to put that in there as well. Just be careful with your words. Try not to project any emotions. Right, strengths will come into the end. Strengths. this is everything. This is not everything. There's so much more. But I think it's really important to be aware of your strengths. So for me, I always kind of just looked at my weaknesses all the time, thinking I can't do this and I can't do that. And education kind of does point you in that direction because it's always like feedback on what you can do better and what. But there's nothing like actually going, you're great at this. You know what I mean? So for me, I'm starting to switch things around, and I'm thinking, okay, well, what are my strengths? And how can that help my weaknesses? Not what are my weaknesses? What the hell am I going to do with that? You know, it's just kind of flipping it on its head. So for me, I'm very empathetic and very creative and very good at problem solving. Love puzzles. Very good at reasoning and resilience. I think resilience is probably my biggest one, and I have dyslexia, thank for that, because I have fought so many different barriers. Nothing can really touch me anymore. So I want you to just kind of, if you take one thing away from this, is go away and make lists of your strengths. I think it's the best thing you can do for yourself. This is just for people who are like starting a journey with dyslexia. So what are your strengths and weaknesses, number one? And kind of, you know, anything, basically do look what you have to help you already. So what your strengths and weaknesses, your diagnosis assessment actually is probably one of the best things because they outline what your strengths and what your weaknesses are in an educational and test sense. But you've also got overlays and other people, which I didn't do this. I've not really told anybody until I've done this, this project. And I just put it out on Facebook, and the amount of people that got back to me who was like, oh, I'm dyslexic, and they gave me so many like tips and skills and ideas that I would never have thought of by myself. In school, you obviously have access to assessments and help. Same with university. I had a personal learning plan, exam support. I had disability students allowance, which provided me a printer, dictaphone, software. They were great. Exam boards. I didn't know this, and I wish I had this when I did my grades. There's actually so much adaptability for exams for dyslexics. So doing oral tests, which I really needed, was breaking down that what's the test called? Like the echo tests where someone plays something, you've got to sing it back or play it back. I could never do them because I either got the full 8 bars as a skeleton or I got 2 bars perfectly and nothing in between. So it's all on ABRSM or whatever exam board you're with. They've got loads of stuff on there for people with learning disabilities. BDSA actually have a dyslexic teacher, like trained teachers tutor list, which was amazing. I didn't think that was a thing. And then look at this. Look at your own work, like outline your own structure, look at your colours and your fonts, how you present your own work, look at your own reading styles, and it's a lot of it is all about kind of looking at yourself and analysing yourself. And if you can't do that, ask somebody, because a lot of people probably know it before you. And the biggest thing is just believe in yourself. I think that's the biggest thing that I wish someone said to me. Right. Now, this is kind of my advice to students, to teachers and peers. So the biggest thing is multisensory. That is, I think the thing that's changed me as a player and as a student and as a teacher for other people. And it's just so much more fun. You just get to run about, but make it productive. You know, you're not stuck behind a metal stand and music. You know, it's quite restrictive. So be creative with your teaching styles. I love using stationery I love stationery, but I love using stationery as a teaching tool. You'd be surprised how many like objects in this room you can use to present something to a child. So elastic bands. I had a child who was struggling with keeping their bow straight, so I just linked a load of elastic bands together, created a chain, put one on their arm, one on their wrist, one on the violin, and boom, you've got straight bows. You know, just be creative, like water bottles, great for belt holes and weight transfer. There's so many things you can do, and I think just take 5 minutes to just think, right, is there anything in this room that can help me? Rubbers are great. I think just be open to more ideas and creative ideas. And I think as well, a lot of people, well, through my experience, teachers kind of see dyslexia and think, oh, it's another thing you've got to get around and think about. But actually, it's such a good thing because you're saying to that teacher, actually, this is how my brain presents. These is how the symptoms in which it presents out in. You know, so you've got actually a clear path where someone who's neurotypical, you don't have really a clear picture of actually how their brain presents. So actually, I think it's a really good key to know that somebody is dyslexic and they go, okay, well, what do you struggle with? So I'd be like, struggle with concentration, coordination. Great, okay, they're your weaknesses. Now let's look at your strengths to help with that. You've got such a clear path, which I don't think a lot of teachers see that as. Don't pin everything on dyslexia. I think the first thing to do is see if there's an actual physiological reason, whether there's something else, whether it's just like, oh, your finger's in the wrong place, rather than going, oh, it's your coordination. You know, don't jump to it. I think see if there's another issue that isn't to do with the brain type first. Empower your students. And dyslexic can be really overwhelming sometimes, the barriers. You can face a lot of barriers in a neurotypical world. So they just help them through it and support it. And just be patient and flexible. I think that's the main thing. Now these are just a few things. So I sent, I know we've run over 3 minutes, but I sent some a call out to dyslexic musicians, and I had a lot of people come back, and it was really lovely. So I sent them some questions to answer. So these are just some of the things. So the first question I put, is there anything from your experience in which you feel staff could have done more to support you in your music education and performance? And if so, how could they have done this? So yeah, have a read. I'm gonna have a drink. Go on to the next one. Going through your own struggles, what piece of advice would you give to a fellow dyslexic starting their musical journey? And the next one. What piece of advice or wisdom do you wish you had early on in your journey, if any? Still need to get better at that one. Get comfortable with being early. I'm late for everything. And then two more. Any positive or negative experiences? Any positive or negative dyslexic experience you would like to share? I love this one, run your race. And then last one. Is there anything else you would like to say that you think would be helpful for people to hear or know? Advice, experience, resources, book recommendation, or facts? And then last one. So what is your superpower? Because mine's dyslexia. So bit of cheese, we love it. So I've added a list of resources as well that I found has been great and really helpful. And then we've got some citations on the other page as well. If anybody's got any questions, I will send this out as well because I know it's been a lot and there's a lot of really good links that I didn't get time to do. I recommend just having a look at the videos and the links as well. But does anybody have any questions at all? Yeah.
Do you experience difficulties in like reading music sheets?
Yeah, sometimes. So for me, I kind of same as reading. So I struggle to track lines sometimes. So I will just jump a whole section.
Because in one of your slides you said that phonological processing is like linking a symbol to a sound.
Yeah.
But linguistically it's not always that case because when you're reading a text, it's like you get that visual stimuli.
Mm-hmm.
You're searching that word in your mental lexicon.
Okay, yeah.
That dictionary entry of a word with its syntactic and phonological properties.
Mm-hmm.
And with such that you go to this phonological processing thing and you say that word out. I think I'm not a musician, but I think it's kind of a little bit similar to reading sheet music. You're reading the symbols.
Yeah.
And you get might be a music scale inside of your head, and you produce the music out. Yeah. So I think this might be there's still kind of a link between these two kind of things.
Yeah, definitely. I think definitely there is. Yeah, I think, and it also depends as well on. So for me, like, I'm not very good at, because of my auditory process, I'm not very good at kind of hearing sounds before I play it. So for me, that kind of gets quite muddled. But there's definitely, from what you're saying, it definitely sounds like there's a similar link between it, and I think that's really cool. It's two sides looking at it. It's brilliant.
Wonderful presentation.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, is there any other questions? Anyone on Zoom?
What's a good score for that test we did?
I didn't really want to give a score because I didn't want to give anyone a complex. I think what I'd say is I don't want to give you a score because I'm not 100% on it. But I think like if you're aiming for like midway or a little bit less, I think that's fine. But research it. Have a look. And it'll be all on BDSA, British Dyslexia Association website. But yeah, I didn't want to give anyone a score because I didn't want to give them a complex about it. But it was just a bit of an exercise to get them to everyone to feel it under that pressure. Yeah.
The first one, never mind.
Anyone on Zoom? Does anyone have any questions? Just unmute if you want. But yeah, if you're all happy, thank you for coming, and I really appreciate it. Yeah, thank you. Thanks. Thanks. Thank you. Oh, chat. Thanks, guys. Thank you for coming.
Because I'm not a WBT. Yeah.
Oh, I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thanks, Tom. Hopefully see you soon.
You get done all right.
See you later.
Jessica,
How many?
Yeah.
I work
hours
for the
do you
Youngstrings.
do?
I was the only one who could come because they were teaching right now. Is there any chance we could have the recording?
Yeah.
Is that all right? Send it to me. It's
Oh, you key,
yeah,
Jenny
Jenny
key.
Ducky, yeah.
Lovely. Let me write. Yeah, I'll send it over.
Amazing. Because yeah.
Yeah. No, that's fine. I'll write that down. Yeah, and because I tried to do I've got loads of different things. It wasn't just me talking, but I was like, I'm gonna run out of time.
No, it's fine.
But yeah,
if they watch it in their own time,
to do all the links and stuff, that'd be nice. Yeah, no problem.